Hi witchlings! Welcome back to my channel. It's me, your local chaotic witch aunt. If you haven't seen some of my other social medias, I cut my hair. It is all cut off, so now we have a bit of a long pixie situation going on. But in other news today, we are talking about deity worship, deity honoring, deity veneration. Yes, those are three different things, and I'm going to be pulling up kind of what I consider my definitions of deity veneration and honoring versus deity worship. I did have a video on deity work a while back, and I did mention worship kind of slightly, but I didn't go in depth into my worship, what worship is, etc. So this video is dedicated to deity worship. Now, what is worship of a deity? In the same way that you would think of worship of anything, that is what deity worship is. You are, giving them offerings, you are giving them time, you are taking time out of your life and your day to honor them in a lot of different ways. I do think that I use the terms honor and worship very kind of interchangeably, even though they're not necessarily interchangeable. Honoring and venerating are a little bit more different. So some examples of deity worship in kind of my area is things I do in devotion to a deity of mine. So something I do in devotion to Freya is my makeup. Glamour magic for Freya is one of my devotional worship activities. Something I do for the Morgan, or Anne Morgan, is setting my boundaries, asserting my boundaries, and choosing to stick to them no matter what. That is something I do in devotion to her. I'm still working out my devotional stuff with Diana just because she's newer in my life, and my devotional stuff for Canar/Lucifer/Dianis is mostly spending time outside, connecting with the earth, connecting with my animal and plant allies. If you're interested in hearing more about that, you can go back to my spirit work video, which should be linked up here or over here, whichever way editing Frankie wants to do it. But because different deities have patronage over different things, they're gonna have different ways of being worshipped, different ways of receiving offerings. So some examples of offerings for some deities include there's a spider right there. Very typically throughout history, when we see worship, we see, in Greece, kids going to worship at temples or leaving offerings at a temple, making temples for gods as a way of worshiping them. So in a lot of Hellenic and Roman religions, you will see basically, the offerings of smoke, offerings of libations, offerings of prayer and song. This differs from place to place. Incense is an offering I've seen a lot in Eastern esoteric practices and religions. We see wine, mead, bread, meat a lot in Norse religions, and it really kind of depends on what area and culture you're talking about when we look at how they are venerated or how they are worshipped. Anyone can do deity worship. You can do deity worship without protection because you are just giving your time and energy in devotion to that deity. A very simple way of worshiping an entity is taking time out of your day to research them. I consider that worship, as you are actually going out of your way to learn about them, to learn about their culture, to learn the myths and the songs and the folklore around them. To me, that is worship. That is doing something in devotion to them. You can also do activities in devotion to them. You can cook for them. You can hold a feast for them. Give them libations of wine, of water, of food. You can give them basically whatever. I mean, I've seen a lot of different types of offerings. My typical offerings include doing activities in their honor. Like I said, I do my makeup for Freya, going on hikes for Lord Luciferus. And then we have, I give them coffee and water are very typical offerings that I give to my deities. Wine is a very typical offering I give to my deities. And I actually have an offering plate that, because you guys are propped up on my altar, that behind you has a Snickers bar, a few other little chewy candles, and some money on it. So candy, money, water, wine. There are activities. There's so many different ways to worship a deity. But as where deity work is kind of a give and take relationship, you are giving offerings in response to guidance. You are working with them as a partner, as either a student or as someone who is a peer. You are learning beside them. Worshiping is more putting them on a pedestal. And in some ways, I do think that some level of worship is necessary for deity work. I started by worshiping a lot of my deities and then going into deity work. But I've heard people who just kind of launched into work or just did worship, no problem. So it really is up to you, and I would definitely do more research on that. Other things that are very typical in worship is prayer. Is another aspect of it, and I think to honor and to worship, so I did a little bit of research, to honor and to worship are closer than veneration. When we talk within the kind of Catholicism and Orthodox theology, veneration is a type of honor distinct from true worship, which is veritable adoration, which is due to God, which would be the Christian or Catholic God alone. Veneration, known as dulia in classic theology, is the honor and reverence appropriately due to excellence of a created person. So you would be venerating saints, venerating your ancestors. These are things we see a lot in folk Catholicism as well. If you venerate them, you're giving them excellence, you are giving them respect. Veneration looks like a lot of different things in the same way that worship does. For venerating my ancestors, I tend to try to live in an image that they would like. I try to venerate them through healing generational trauma. I venerate them by holding a devotional space for them and holding a space for them in my life. Versus worship, I kind of go out of my way and do a lot of activities, do a lot of prayer, give a lot of offerings. And while I do still give, offerings to honor and venerate my ancestors, there is almost a difference. In a way, you can see it as with the saints and with the ancestors, we are almost on equal playing field in a lot of ways. When you're worshiping a deity, like you said, you're putting them above. Do I think that this idea of worship can tie very, very closely to, Catholicism and how they worship God? Yes, but I also think that within pagan Reconstructionist circles, there is a lot of worship, and it's not something to shy away from just because you feel like it's close to Catholicism. The bottom line is there's a difference between, adoring and worshiping a God because you fear what will happen because it's what you're told to do, versus worshiping a God because you genuinely love them and adore them and enjoy their presence and their gifts to you and their guidance in your life. That is not necessarily everyone's perception of Catholicism and Christianity. It is my perception due to my biases, but we could also flip the tables and say that someone raised in a pagan family is worshiping a pagan deity only because they are told to do so, and it's just what their family does, and they find that they fall in love and adore and seek the guidance of the Christian God. I think that, worshiping when it's done out of a place of genuine enjoyment and genuine, like, this is my spiritual path, this is what I want to be on, this is my religion, it is a fantastic thing to get in touch with. And like I said, everyone can worship. A lot of people would argue that you need protection before you worship, and I would argue against that merely based on historical sources of children worshiping in Grecian temples or Hellenic temples. I don't think that worshiping and giving honor to a divine being or an archetype or a spirit is going to open the door for something negative to come in, versus, like I said, deity work is a little bit more intense. It's more like going under their wing as a student, standing beside them as an equal. And I do think that there's a lot of differences between fearing the divine or fearing reparations from the divine and working with them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by fearing reparations from the divine. I see a lot of people on the internet saying, oh, I forgot a bowl of water, and then my candle got yeeted across my room. And I will say this, I've never had that experience with pagan deities, which does not mean that you do not have that experience. But I do find that the fear of the divine is rooted in Catholicism in a lot of ways. I think that a healthy respect for divine, for deities, is good and normal and what you should have. But having a respect for something doesn't mean you fear what they'll do to you if you mess up. Because you do mess up a lot, and a lot of times when I've messed up, I've gotten like a nice little tilt in the right direction, or a sign, or a lesson, not, something actually harming me and being put in my way to harm me. But generally, I think worship is a really great place to start, and worship can start with, like I said, just researching this divine entity that you're interested in, setting up a space for them, which could be an altar, it can be a candle devoted to them, you can get a little statue of them. I have a statue of Diana on my altar, and from there you can, you know, offer water, you can offer coffee, you can offer candy, just something to show that you admire them, that you respect them, that you enjoy their existence. Almost like giving a gift to a person. That is what deity worship is. You are giving a gift to something just because you love them and because you want them to have it, versus having a gift exchange where everyone brings a gift and everyone gets something. Which there's still that mutual respect, and you want everyone to get something that they enjoy because you enjoy the presence of those people when you exchange gifts, but you are both getting something in return. And I do have a video more in depth on deity work, so if you're interested in deity work after deity worship, you know where to go. One of these little areas up here, because editing Frankie is gonna put it in. Do it. And so, like I said, I went over a few things for worship. My worship with my deities is because I work with 4 deities right now. My worship is relatively intense, and my worship is mostly for Diana right now. Diana, Freya, and the Morrigan are the energies that I worship the most because I respect them so much, and they have given me so much, and they have led me and guided me to a point where I feel like it's only right for me to worship them. And worshiping, like I said, still sets them up on a little pedestal above me because they're divine beings. I cannot bring them down to human standards, but there is a little bit more of a, okay, I don't need to worry about you smiting me. I know I make jokes about getting smited a lot, and we do historically have myths that talk about what happens when a deity is upset with a mortal, but we also need to understand that those myths are stories to conceptualize and anthropomorphize the gods, not necessarily the god on his truth. Do I think that if you're super disrespectful to a deity, your life may be on the wrong trajectory for a little bit? Yes, I've seen it happen, but I've also seen people bounce back from that. And I'm sure that there were other factors involved there that you didn't see. It wasn't just disrespect to a divine entity. I mean, maybe they had mental health stuff going on. Maybe they had a death in the family. This is the point of the video where I would probably give you resources into looking into deity worship. I mostly have done my research around my worship with historically how these entities were worshipped. Even if I can't historically worship them the same way, understanding the cultural context in which they come from and which they were revered and worshipped and or venerated or honored is a great way to understand it. If you don't want to start with worship, you can start with veneration, which you don't have to give a lot of offerings. You can venerate them. You can venerate and honor the aspects of them that you see in yourself. But if you do plan on starting worship, I do recommend a few things. One, setting up a space on an altar, whether this is your working altar, a devotional altar, or another separate place, to just have a space for them to inhabit. You can do a candle devoted to them, you can do a statue, or you can just do something that reminds you of them. A piece of nature you think they may like, a rock devoted to them, anything like that. From there, you are opening up space, physical space, and the spiritual space for them to enter your life. From there, if you are worshiping, I would recommend praying to them or just talking. A book of pagan prayer is a really great resource for this. Even just looking up invocations or evocations to them to call them into your life. And then start giving offerings. You can set up a little offering plate, research their associations, research what they enjoy, what kind of foods they like, what kind of herbs they like, what kind of rocks they like, and research their mythology. Look into the cultural context of them, understand the myths from which they came from, how they were worshipped. And those are the 4 things that I recommend for starting worship. And from there, it will develop according to how you really have a relationship with this deity. My worship for my deities is not going to look the same as your worship for your deities. I can give tips for my particular deities and, you know, what I think they like. For Anne Morgan, she loves action. She loves me reading the mythos and educating myself on topics that she chooses, like alchemy, her Celtic mythology, but she also is very much focused on how are you going to live in her image? How are you going to take action in her honor, in devotion to her? Are you going to assert your boundaries? Are you going to reclaim your sovereignty and power? That is what she cares about, the action. She cares less about physical offerings, even though you can give them to her, than she does about how you will live for her. With Freya, it's a mix of action and offerings. You cannot deny that she will love a nice little pearl, because I gave her a pearl, and some rose quartz and some chocolate, but she also wants you to take care of yourself. She wants you to radically accept yourself, and she wants you to choose your battles. These are the main lessons that she has taught me throughout the years I've worked with her, is no matter what you look like or what you feel about yourself, she cares on whether you love yourself and accept yourself for what you are. Not if anyone else does. Doesn't matter if anyone else does. So if you're seeking validation for any other people and you begin to worship her, you may notice that goes away. And with the worship, they may bestow gifts upon you. It's not necessary, and then it may turn into work. With Diana, I have a lot of moonstone, garnet. I have a statue for her. I do pour wine out for her every single full moon. And I do, rituals in her honor. A lot of times it's hexes against predators, because historically Diana's hunts were against predators. You release them into the woods and hunted them down. So I will sometimes do hexes in her honor. I also have some little butterfly wings and stuff, because in the Aradian folklore, she is queen of the fairies. I have a little protection spell for my dog there as well. And Diana, I try to live in her image as well, in the way that she's independent. She's a huntress. She is the moon. So bringing in the moon phases a little more into my life is something I'm trying to do to worship her, and a few other things as well. Luciferus/Cronanos/Dianas, I always go out of my way to take care of nature, pick up trash outside, connect with my animals, connect with my animal and plant allies, connect with the yard outside, and nourish my relationship to the earth and to the land, because he is a guardian of wild places. He is a horned god, and that is what is important to him. From there, he also likes bones, and anything that you find outside. He's not very picky with very extravagant offerings, any sort of deer antlers, bones, some crystals. I gave him tree bark that he really enjoys. I gave him a plant and he really enjoys it, stuff like that. But yeah, if I feel like anything's missing from this, or you feel like anything's missing from this, please leave a comment with a question. This will be up Friday, so I will see you next week. You can like, subscribe, turn the bell on if you want, but don't feel pressured. And if you stayed through the whole video, you already know I love you. So have a fantastic rest of your day. Remember to drink water, take care of yourself, and I will link the resources I mentioned below.